Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is to take stacks of research, dense articles, and complex biographies and transform them into crystal clear, actionable knowledge for you. Today, we are deep diving into the life and mind of Anba, the Metropolitan of Tanta. He's an Egyptian figure who our source material describes as, well, truly exceptional.
Yeah, and this is far more than just a historical profile. The main analysis we're digging into on Paula and the Arc of Love, it doesn't just list his achievements, religious leader, geologist, community organizer. It really tries to dissect his cognitive model. We're looking at these seemingly separate roles, the rigorous, methodical logic of a scientist and the profound compassion of a spiritual leader, how they all came together.
That's the core tension, isn't it? The thing we really need to unpack. You usually hear about a spiritual calling, overriding worldly logic, but here it seems the logic actually served the calling. His whole approach to life feels less like he was just inheriting a tradition and more like he was.
Well, engineering a highly specialized system from the ground up, all for a specific mission.
And that's our mission today, to understand that combination. How did a highly analytical, almost clinical, scientific mindset not only survive, but become flawlessly integrated into a path of deep spiritual commitment and huge social impact?
This is the story of someone who was, as the source says, an engineer of his own life. And I think the core thesis we're going to chase today is that his success in all these different fields, from managing a national crisis to social reform, it all comes from meticulously applying scientific planning to areas that are usually run by emotion or just, tradition.
So let's unpack the blueprint of this life. We have to start right at the beginning.
Let's do it.
To really get the strategic planning here, you have to look at the foundational decision. The source material shows that Anba, who was born Azmi Anas Assad, he decided his life's path at an astonishingly early age.
How early?
11 years old.
11? He read the story of St. Anthony the Great, the founder of Christian monasticism, and that was it. The decision was made. He was going to become a monk.
I mean, at 11, most of us are deciding which comic book to read, but our sources are clear. This wasn't some fleeting childhood fantasy. Geology. Okay, so that's the question I want to dig into. Why geology? Why not say agricultural engineering, which also seems pretty critical for desert life, or even linguistics to master ancient texts?
And that is the perfect question, because it forces us to use his own analytical framework. His choice wasn't based on what was most interesting or even what was easiest. It was a pure strategic calculation.
A feasibility study.
A mental feasibility study, exactly. He looked at the monastic life. Where does it actually happen?
In the desert.
In the mountains.
Right, in the rugged, isolated parts of the world. So he asked the logical engineering question: what profession gives me academic cover but also practical knowledge that is specifically relevant to the environment I'm going to live in forever?
And the answer was geology.
The definitive answer. He was studying the Earth's structures, its foundations, its resources, its challenges. All of it was directly applicable to a life of asceticism in a desert monastery.
So he wasn't just putting his spiritual journey on hold. He was using his university years as an advanced specialized training program.
He was learning what the sources call the language of the desert and mountains.
And it went deeper than just geography. I mean, think about it. Geology teaches you about stability, about stratification, about the deep, hidden forces that shape a landscape. You could argue he was acquiring the very mental framework he'd later use to build stable social institutions.
To understand the layers of society.
To identify the foundational problems beneath all the surface-level conflicts. His spiritual passion was being managed with scientific, logical rigor. He was making sure his preparation was complete.
And that preparation was so good that when he graduated in 1974 with a very good grade, the secular world was banging on his door.
Desperately wanted him. He got not one, but 3 major official appointment letters. It just shows you the massive pull towards a successful worldly life.
And these were big offers.
Career-defining. An academic post at Cairo University's Faculty of Science, a research position at the National Research Center, an appointment at the Scientific Research Academy.
Any one of those is a dream job. Rejecting one would be hard. Rejecting all 3, that's almost unheard of.
He rejected all of them.
Wow.
It just speaks volumes about the absolute clarity of his goal. It wasn't about the jobs themselves, it was about the absolute commitment to the plan he made when he was 11 years old.
Finish military service, enter the monastery. Period.
That was the path. No material temptation, no career lure was allowed to divert him. It required just incredible self-discipline.
He was basically sacrificing immediate high-level influence for a much longer-term, more focused kind of commitment.
And speaking of those obligations, his mandatory military service, well, that became just another area where he applied this strategic mindset. He turned a constraint into a benefit.
That's genuinely surprising to me. I mean, military service is all about external command, a lack of personal control. How did he manage to turn that into a spiritual retreat?
He deliberately transformed it. He converted the mandatory service into what he called an elective spiritual retreat, a kilwa. The sources say he actually sought out and got a specific post, a cabin 800 meters high up in the mountains.
So he could be isolated.
Exactly. Intense isolation, rigorous asceticism, all while technically serving his country. He basically engineered his own high-altitude monastic lab inside this giant military framework.
Incredible.
And the anecdotes from that time really bring it to life. The sources say that at one point he lived for 10 full days on nothing but a desert plant called Anba.
10 days.
And this wasn't just some endurance stunt. It was viewed as an intensive spiritual training camp.
An extreme form of stress testing himself.
Yes, it was a dress rehearsal for the monastic life he wanted. He was testing everything, not just his physical limits, but the clarity of his conviction under duress, his reliance on providence, his ability to maintain spiritual discipline when conditions were at their worst.
The engineer in him needed proof of concept.
He was prototyping his own commitment before he went all in. And after that level of methodical preparation, academic, spiritual, and physical, his entry into the monastery was, swift and systematic.
Makes sense.
He entered Alberamus Monastery in 1976, and his progression followed that same organized, methodical structure. He became Bishop of Tata in '89 and then Metropolitan in 2018. The key takeaway here for you, the listener, is that deep faith, when you combine it with logical planning, it creates a far more durable and effective foundation for a life of service.
And that disciplined analytical foundation served him perfectly when he shifted his focus from, let's say, self-engineering to social engineering. The Arc of Love project is the perfect example of that.
It's the ultimate case study. It shows the move from an emotional spark to a full-blown institutional design. And the catalyst was this profoundly moving human encounter. An elderly, sick mother came to him, and she was just overwhelmed with fear.
What was she afraid of?
She asked him, "I am the one who protects and feeds my adult son with Down syndrome. When I pass away, who will protect him?"
Wow. That's a moment where for most people, the instinct is just pity or immediate financial help. Solve that one person's problem right now.
But Paula's mind immediately bypassed the symptom and went straight to the root cause. He realized the problem wasn't unique to this one child.
It was a systemic failure.
A systemic failure impacting all children with special needs whose caregivers would eventually pass away. His analytical response dictated that the solution had to be systematic, institutional, and, most importantly, financially sustainable beyond any single person's lifetime.
This is where that geologist's methodology really reemerges. The insistence on rigorous structure, on deep analysis, but now in the social sphere. He didn't just rely on good intentions.
No, not at all. The source highlights that he conducted rigorous research and a full-scale feasibility study. He treated this social project with the same methodological rigor you'd apply to a major engineering project.
He didn't assume that good intentions would be enough.
He used global standards. He traveled to Italy and Switzerland. And his goal wasn't to just copy their models, it was to study their accumulated experiences. This is pure benchmarking. He spent days studying their organizational charts, writing notes, taking photos, interviewing staff.
All to understand best practices.
And, crucially, to identify their common mistakes. His goal was, as the source puts it, to start where others ended. He was building on a global body of knowledge to avoid reinventing the wheel and to make sure the project was the absolute best it could be.
And this commitment to rigor then defined the implementation. The facility wasn't just a basic care home.
Not even close. It was designed to be like a 5-star resort. And that wasn't about extravagance. It was a calculated investment in human dignity and maximizing potential.
Walk us through the detail of that. Why a 5-star approach? What does that actually mean in a care facility?
It means the goal was holistic development, not just custodial care. The source details the precise, calculated inclusion of dedicated sensory, mental, and nervous laboratories.
Wow.
Speech units, a swimming pool. These aren't just amenities, they are therapeutic tools. The whole design was about maximizing the stimulation and developmental potential for children with specialized needs. Every detail was calculated for a purpose.
Okay, so now we get to the really difficult part, the funding paradox. You have this extremely high-quality, complex service. It's provided completely free of charge, and it serves both Muslims and Christians. Five-star operating costs with zero revenue. How does an analytical mind make those numbers work?
This is where his integrity model comes in. His philosophy was based on absolute transparency and meticulous planning. He believed that when you present a project built with such precision, such quality, it automatically draws sustainable trust and support.
So success and operational integrity became the marketing. Instead of emotional fundraising appeals, he was essentially offering donors a chance to fund competence and accountability.
Precisely. Donors trust systems that are proven to be sound. By designing the Ark with the meticulousness of an engineer, he basically guaranteed its efficacy, and that built the trust that allowed the project to sustain itself.
And his vision for societal integration was just as strategic. This wasn't just charity, it was proactive citizenship.
The specifics are crucial here. He made sure the facility had a spacious, dedicated prayer area with clear Islamic symbols. And then he went a step further. He contracted an Al-Azhar sheikh to provide religious instruction for the Muslim children living there.
That is a powerful statement. It's practical, ground-level citizenship. It shows a mentality that sees the community not through the lens of difference, but through the universal needs of care and dignity.
And the Ark itself wasn't an isolated project. It was part of a bigger, holistic network of services, which proves his view of society as this interconnected whole.
He understood you can't just solve one problem in isolation.
Exactly. The network included Brethren of the Lord for poor families, the Abiyar Vocational Training Center to tackle unemployment, and the Sambo Charitable Clinics. He was treating the vulnerable, developing human capital, and providing critical services all at the same time. It's systems thinking applied to humanitarian work.
We've established this disciplined foundation in his personal life, the structural genius in his social work. Now we have to turn to the most volatile arena of all, applying that same organized, methodical mindset to the chaos of high-stakes politics and national crisis.
And that test came during his participation in the constitutional assemblies of 2012 and 2014. The environment then was hyper-polarized, highly emotional. But his approach, it just remained defined by absolute clarity.
He entered the political arena but refused to be defined by it.
His historic quote from 2012 really captures this. He led with his national identity first. He said, "I am Anba, Paula the Egyptian, and I will not accept a constitution that is not accepted by all Egyptians."
That brings us to his philosophy of what the source calls paternal neutrality. How does a high-profile religious leader participate in a divisive political process without abandoning his role as a guide for everyone?
In today's adversarial politics, that seems almost impossible. Taking any stance means making enemies. But his answer was rooted in a clear intellectual distinction. He argued a religious figure has to be a father to all. The moment you join a political party, you sacrifice that universal fatherhood. You just become another player in the conflict. You lose your moral authority.
So he separated the eternal from the temporary. Religion is constant, thabet. Politics is variable, mutagare.
Exactly. The permanent spiritual constants should never be tied to the temporary, shifting political variables. So he participated purely as an experienced, analytical Egyptian citizen. He used his skills and knowledge, but he never used his clerical authority to impose a view, and that's what allowed him to maintain credibility across the board.
The ultimate test of this non-emotional, strategic logic came during the Tanta church bombing, a moment of profound national pain and the highest possible risk of internal sedition.
And in the immediate aftermath, his priority wasn't personal grief, which must have been immense. He was applying his operational logic to protect the country from mass sedition, from fitna. His first public statement was a direct order to prioritize the national interest.
What did he say?
While we speak of the incident, we must place Egypt before our eyes, protect and preserve it.
That focus on national stability over an emotional reaction under that kind of pressure is just extraordinary. But it was his two critical strategic decisions about the dead that really show this operational logic at work.
The first was the decision for a collective burial. He ordered the mass burial of all the martyrs inside the church compound itself. This was not the easiest choice or the most traditional one, but it was calculated risk management.
What risk specifically was he trying to mitigate?
He was preventing what the source calls the horrifying scenario. Imagine if the individual bodies had been transported back to dozens of different home villages and cities across the country.
Ah,
Every single funeral procession becomes a potential flashpoint, a site of local, explosive grief and anger. By containing the event to one secure location, he contained the crisis, geographically and emotionally. He stopped the fire from spreading.
that's essentially preemptive conflict avoidance through logistical control. It's a geopolitical calculation disguised as a funeral arrangement.
It truly is. And the second decision was just as difficult. He chose to hold the prayer for the martyrs late that same night, instead of waiting for the traditional mourning period the next morning.
Why the rush? Wouldn't waiting have given families more time to process?
It was a purely practical decision, driven by his respect for human dignity. Due to the catastrophic nature of the injuries and the heat, the bodies were beginning to decompose. Delaying the burial would have compromised the dignity of the dead. It took immense courage to push through that process in the dark, prioritizing logical, respectful action over traditional timing in the face of an unprecedented crisis.
That same structural thinking was applied to legislative challenges too, right? Specifically, the church construction law.
Yes, he said the law's success came from its methodology. It focused on addressing the systemic causes of the decades-old problem, things like arbitrary bureaucratic hurdles, rather than just treating the symptoms like issuing temporary permits.
The geologist's logic again. Find the fault line, not just the surface tremor.
Exactly. He wanted a root cause cure, ensuring the framework was stable and equitable for the long term.
This commitment to addressing root causes leads us directly to what might be his most innovative idea, his concept of intellectual fortification.
He introduced this powerful term, anticipatory intellectual immunization, al-tahsin al-fikri al-istibaki.
That phrase, anticipatory intellectual immunization, is brilliant. It immediately grounds this complex philosophical idea in the practical, successful logic of preventative medicine.
That's the analogy he used, vaccination. He argued, why wait for extremist or divisive ideas to spread like a virus among young people?
Right.
It's far more effective to give them an intellectual vaccination early on. He believed that the idea that reaches a young mind first is usually one that takes root, which makes changing their mind later extremely difficult and costly.
So his strategy moves the battleground away from constantly playing defense against extremism to a proactive public health approach. What did his educational prescription actually involve?
It was long-term and systemic. First, curriculum reform, removing what he called sectarian thorns from school books and purposefully planting roses of tolerance and citizenship. It's like intellectual landscape gardening.
But curriculum changes can fall flat if the teachers aren't on board.
Which is why his second point was crucial. Monitoring and following up with the teachers themselves to make sure they aren't personally spreading poisonous ideas in the classroom. He knew the poison often travels through the trusted messenger.
And the third part.
The third part was all about practical integration through school activities, promoting teamwork where kids have to collaborate regardless of their religious background, building that muscle of cooperation into their daily lives.
And that analytical approach wasn't just for policy. It was the core of his dialogue strategy, especially when he was confronted aggressively. The case study from the 2012 Constitution Committee is a perfect example.
It's a remarkable anecdote. A Salafist leader approached him with this very charged, stereotyping question. It was designed to provoke an emotional response. He said, "Why do you wear black? Are you mourning since Islam entered Egypt? And you won't change until you remove us."
That's a direct attack framed as a question. It's designed to force him onto the defensive.
But his response was perfectly calm, non-defensive.
Yeah.
It was based entirely on comparative logic. He just bypassed the attack and asked two simple redirecting questions.
Which were?
Why does the judge wear black and why does the lawyer wear black?
He used respected, universal professional uniforms to diffuse the religious charge. He moved the whole argument from theology and conflict to shared social order.
Exactly. He created a neutral common ground. And then he offered the theological explanation that the black habit is an ancient tradition predating Islam by centuries. The color symbolizes death to the world. The monk dies to worldly desires to live for God.
So he provided a logical, historical, and theological answer, but only after he'd completely neutralized the emotional accusation. What was the result of that exchange?
Total conviction. Immediate respect. The Salafist leader's response was, wrong information reached us. We need to meet and learn from each other. The structured, analytical approach completely transformed a confrontation into a call for mutual understanding.
We've seen his logical prowess on the national stage. Now we shift to the micro level. For 29 years, Anba Paula was head of the Ecclesiastical Council for Personal Status. He was dealing with the daily flood of human complexity, divorce, custody battles, family disputes.
The sheer volume of that is staggering. These are agonizing human stories. The role requires this rare combination of deep empathy for the suffering, but also the clinical detachment you need to make fair judgments.
Like a judge in a high court.
And the sources say that's why Patriarch Shenouda chose him, for two reasons. One, he's an exceptional listener. And two, he wasn't easily swayed by external opinions or emotional manipulation, essential qualities for being impartial.
And that rigorous listening, that inability to be easily swayed, those are direct extensions of his analytical training. He was looking for facts, motives, cause and effect in relationships, just like in a geological survey.
And he leveraged that vast expertise in his very popular TV programs like Man Nabni El Bait, Together We Build the Home. The core of his success in family counseling was always applying diagnosis before treatment. He absolutely refused to just treat symptoms.
So he didn't just advise on how to stop the daily arguments, he looked for why the argument started in the first place.
Precisely. He was always digging down to the root cause, to the foundational layer of the problem. His view was that without an accurate diagnosis, any treatment is just a temporary patch.
Let's use the concrete example from the source material, a child who lies. How did his diagnostic approach differ from a typical reaction?
Well, a typical advisor might just jump to moral judgment or prescribe some kind of punishment. Anba Paula diagnosed the root mechanism. He'd ask the parents two crucial diagnostic questions. First, is the child lying out of severe fear of your punishment? Or second, is the child simply imitating a pattern of dishonest behavior that they see in the adults around them?
That's a fundamental shift from moralizing to behavioral science. Those two diagnoses require completely different treatments.
Absolutely. If the child lies out of fear, the treatment is to reduce the parent's severity, to create a safe space for telling the truth. If the child lies because they're imitating you, the treatment is for the parents to immediately correct their own behavior and model honesty. He provided an accurate diagnosis first, which made the treatment effective. It's like personalized medicine for the family.
And the sources emphasize that his parenting advice was universally applicable. It went beyond any single religion because it was just purely human and educational.
Yes, he was focused on creating balanced, functional people. He warned against the two classic extremes in parenting. On one side, you have excessive pampering, which creates dependent individuals who can't face real-world challenges.
And the other side.
Excessive severity, which just crushes a child's personality and initiative. The goal was always to build psychological stability, much like he built structural stability in his social projects.
And this micro-focus on the family ties directly back to his larger philosophy of societal building.
Yeah, correct. He saw the family as the smallest, most foundational building block of society. If the family unit is sound and healthy, the children will grow up to be balanced, productive citizens, and society as a whole thrives. It's all connected.
His quote really summarizes it. The child is a part of the present and the whole of the future.
Investing in the family is investing in the nation's future stability.
It's exhausting just describing the level of intensity he applied across all these different areas. Which brings us to a surprisingly human moment in the sources. What happens when a mind that dedicated to relentless problem-solving finally faces burnout?
Well, when he was appointed to the crushing demands of the personal status file back in 1989, dealing with that daily trauma, he suffered severe mental fatigue, debilitating insomnia, which is completely understandable.
So what was his self-prescribed remedy? Most people would seek total rest. A vacation. Medication, maybe.
His treatment was intensely intellectual and totally counterintuitive. He decided to read for 2 hours every single night before bed. But critically, he read topics that were entirely unrelated to his duties: politics, economics, science, medicine, history. A huge range.
So he treated mental fatigue not by resting his mind, but by strategically diverting it.
He was performing a mental reset, engaging entirely different cognitive pathways to draw his mind away from the day's crises. It's like clearing a computer's RAM by running a completely different intensive program.
A neural defragging.
That's a perfect way to put it. It prevented the day's human trauma from just looping in his consciousness. And the side effect of this self-prescribed remedy was that he developed this vast encyclopedic culture. It's what made him so effective in those constitutional debates later on.
This intellectual integration, this ability to move fluidly between deep theology and systems theory and economics, that's really key to his influence. And his original background in geology must have shaped his view on the relationship between science and faith.
It did, fundamentally. His perspective was rooted in pragmatism and a certainty in a singular truth. He understood that the Holy Book is not a science textbook. Its goal is spiritual salvation, morality.
Right.
However, he maintained this absolute confidence that it was impossible for the sacred texts to contain actual scientific errors.
That's not forcing religion onto science.
No, it's asserting a unity of source. It's a deep confidence that truth, whether it comes from divine revelation or from rigorous scientific research, is ultimately singular and unified. He refused to compartmentalize the spiritual and the scientific. He saw them as different paths to understanding the same reality.
So when we synthesize this entire life, we don't just see a collection of impressive achievements, we see a perfectly integrated systemic personality. That's a rare quality in any leader.
He was a man of faith and science, service and politics, religion and state. And these facets were never isolated. They were an interconnected network. His scientific organization provided the structure for his faith-driven service.
His geologist logic built sustainable institutions like the Ark of Love. His deep spiritual conviction is what motivated a universal service that went beyond sectarian lines. And his calculated personal discipline allowed him to be that impartial, stabilizing force in a crisis.
Every part served and completed the others. It created this durable, scalable model for leadership. His method allowed him to be proactive, not just reactive. Always analyzing the root cause, whether that cause was a child's trauma, a legislative failure, or the threat of national sedition.
So the big takeaway for you, the listener, is the actionable insight here. It's the practical power of applying a highly analytical, organized mindset to your most compassionate or spiritual goals. Anba Paula's life proves that this mindset isn't the enemy of faith or compassion.
On the contrary.
Strategic planning and logic are the most effective, scalable, and sustainable tools for serving those values. Planning doesn't replace love. Planning empowers love.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought, which comes directly from the source material itself. The analysis concludes with a suggestion that Anba Paula's thought and his projects, the intentional engineering of one's life, the strategic citizenship, that idea of anticipatory intellectual immunization, that these should be studied academically in universities.
So here's the question for you to take away. If you were designing a curriculum based on his leadership, what specific universal organizational or ethical principles would you extract from his work? What would you teach to the next generation of nonprofit leaders and crisis managers? Think about applying the geologist's logic to the grand design of your own career and your own community.